Sachas Bava Metzia Daf Tes Zayin has two primary sugyas related, flowing from one to the other. The first is the sugya of what happens when someone steals a field, sells it, and then buys it. Who gets that field now? The Gemara will discuss that halacha at length, and that'll take us into the sugya of selling a davar shalei b'el olam, and we'll discuss that with a number of shittas as well. So let's begin. We're the last few lines, the bottom of Daf Tes Vav Amud Beis. Gemara says that Shmuel asked the shayla from Rav. What happens if, let's say, Ruvain stole a field from Levi, and then Ruvain sold it to Shimon, and after he sold this field that he stole, and of course he didn't have a right to sell, he went and he actually bought it from Levi. So the same, he stole a field, sold it, and then he bought it from the real owner. The question is, does he get to keep it now, or does it have to go to Shimon because he had already sold it to Shimon before he ever bought it? So that was the shayla that was asked. The Gemara says that Rav answered that when he originally made a sale to Shimon of this field, he sold him any rights that he'll ever have in this field. The rights that he has at the time, the rights that he'll have in the future, those are the things that he sold. And therefore, the field, after he buys it, goes to Shimon because he had sold him the rights to it, and now he gets the right to it. Later, when he paid the money for it, he gets the right to it, and those rights transfer immediately to Shimon because that was part of the sale. Now, that's not automatic. That's something that he had in mind when he bought it, says the Gemara. And the Gemara gives two svaras as to why he had that in mind when he bought it. When he went back and he bought it from Levi, he had that in mind that it should go to Shimon. The Gemara says he bought it because he felt bad, I guess, about the fact that he sold Shimon a stolen field, and therefore Shimon lost it, and went back to Levi, the rightful owner. And the Gemara has two svaras on it. Mazutra says he doesn't want to be called a thief. That is, he's afraid of getting a bad name. And Rav Ashi says it's not about a avoidance of a negative, it's about building a positive. He wants to build a positive reputation. He wants Shimon to think of him as being an honest guy. So, two very similar svaras, except that Marzutra's svar is about avoiding a bad name, and Rav Ashi's svar is about building a good name. Someone wants to know what's the difference between the two. They seem very similar. The Gemara is going to try 5 different options as to what the difference is. My first pshat is the difference would be in a case where Shimon himself had died, so he's not around. So he's not going to call him a thief. So if he's just afraid of being called a bad name, then he doesn't have to worry about that because Shimon's not around to call him a bad name. If, however, he wants to build a reputation he wants to build even for the sons of Shimon, which still exist, and therefore he wants them to be able to get the field. So Gemara says this is not a good shot because he doesn't want the sons to call him a thief either. And if the sons lose the field that their father Shimon had bought and they don't get it back now, then they're also going to call him a thief, so he'll be called a thief even now. So therefore, this is not really a difference between the two cases. So the Gemara says, all right, so we'll tweak that slightly. We'll say it's not that Shimon died, it's that Reuven himself, the thief, he died after he bought the field. And the difference then becomes, when he bought it, did he have in mind for it to go to Shimon even after he dies? So if you say that the shot is that he wanted to avoid a bad name of being a thief, after he dies, he doesn't care about having a bad name, he's not around anyway. And therefore, it would not go to Shimon. If, however, the Svar says he wants to have a good name, so a person wants to have a good name even in Al Maba, and therefore he would want it to go to Shimon afterwards. So no, this is not a difference either. Even if he died, he doesn't want his kids to be called the sons of a thief. He doesn't want to have a reputation as a thief even after he dies. So therefore, the Gemara says the difference is a third thing. If instead of selling it to Shimon, he gave it to Shimon as a gift. Therefore, if he's afraid of being called a thief, so if Shimon never paid anything for it, he just received it as a gift, and then he loses it, he can't call him a thief. Worst comes to worst, his gift fell apart, but he's not a thief. If, however, he wants to build a reputation as being trustworthy, so then, yeah, sure, if I gave you a gift, I'm going to make sure that you keep it. I'm even going to go buy it to make sure that the gift goes through, and that is something which applies even in case of the gift. Now, the Gemara speaks about other circumstances in which we can have a suffix if he intended really to give it or to have it fill Shimon's need or not. So the Gemara says if he went, and before he bought it from Levi, he went and he sold it again to someone else. He sold the same stolen field. Again, he sold it to Yehuda now. Or he gave it to Yehuda as a gift. Then when he goes and he buys it from Levi, he definitely did not intend for it to be restored to Shimon, because you see, he went and he sold it to someone else. The question is, what if Levi was his father? So instead of buying it from Levi, Levi died and he inherited it from Levi. So he first stole it, sold it, then he inherited it. So he didn't do anything in particular to give it to Shimon. So does that count as if he wanted it to go to Shimon or not? Because he didn't do any tircha for it. Says the Gemara, yeah, that does not count as if he wanted it to go to Shimon. It does not go to Shimon. Another case, what if instead of it falling to him as a Yerusha, he collected it as an obligation? Levi owed him money and he went back to Levi and took Levi's land away. So now it becomes his through collection of a loan. So the Gemara says now it depends if he specifically went for this land, if he went out of his way to get this land. If Levi has other lands that could have taken and he said, no, I want this because I want it, then the implication is that he wants it to go to Shimon. And therefore it'll go to Shimon as a fulfillment of Shimon's loss. If, however, it's the only land he had and he took it just to collect what he had, so that he didn't do anything specifically for Shimon, he doesn't show that he wants Shimon to have it at all. And what if he got it as a gift from Levi? That is the one who he stole it from actually gives them as a gift afterwards. So that's the mechaykus between Rav Acha and Ravina. One says that it's like Yerusha, they didn't do anything for it, and therefore there's no evidence that he tried to get it for Shimon. The other says, no, if he got a gift, he obviously found some way to appease him, to make friends with him, and he went out of his way to get it in that way, and he did that because he wants to go out of his way to get it for Shimon, and therefore it does count. Now, the Gemara asks, until when do we say that he wants to restore to Shimon? If it was years later, you can't say that he bought it in order to restore it to Shimon. So how long does that go? So the Gemara brings three pshatim. Rav Huna says it's until they go to court. If he stays in his rishus of not returning it until they go to court, at that point he decides to buy it. It's not because he decides to do tshuva and miyatzalik and return it. Chibarav says it's until the adrachas happens. That's until 90 days later, when after the court issues a repossession tzav that allows it to be collected. And Rav Papa says it's until they actually do an auction, which is another 30 days after the 90 days after the adrachasa, until they actually put it out for the bid. So at that point, then we say it's too late to say that he's doing tshuva. Now the Gemara moves on to our second sugya of Adavar Shlabal Elam. So the Gemara begins with the Kasha. The Gemara says, Rabbi Rechama asks, how is Shimon kaided the field when Reuven buys it from Levi? How does that go to Shimon? What kinyan did Shimon make on it? The only kinyan Shimon ever did here is the shtar mechir of the field, but that shtar was meaningless because Reuven was selling it to Shimon, and Reuven didn't own it, and Shimon isn't able to be kaided something from Reuven that Reuven doesn't own. So the shtar is garbage. So at what point did Shimon ever make a kinyan here? Nothing that he did is ever a kinyan. Why should it go to Shimon? Even if Reuven bought it in order to give it to Shimon, but the kinyan never occurred. So the Gemara answers that he did make a kinyan. The kinyan is not that he actually did a ma'aseh kinyan, but the kinyan is that Reuven was makneh it to him. Reuven had the das to be goymer or makneh. What was that? From the fact that Shimon trusted him. Shimon said, I trust you that you're going to make sure that I have my field. I myself don't know, but I'm trusting you. That is valuable to Reuven, that trust. And in exchange for that trust, he's makneh the field to him. So at the time that the original sale of the stolen field happens, he's makneh to him the future field, which he's going to get when he buys it. And then later he goes and he buys it, and that's why he actually transferred possession of it to Shimon. But the ma'aseh kinyan was his hakna, his mental hakna, that he decides, that Reuven decides to be makneh to Shimon, who trusted him. So Mara asks that at the time of that kinyan, Reuven didn't own it. So how could you make a hakna? How could you be makneh something that you don't own? So the Gemara doesn't just ask the stam. The Gemara brings a kasha from a brisa that shows that you can't be makneh something that you don't own yet. And Rav Sheshes brings a brisa. There's a reish and a seifa, two cases very similar. The difference is in the reish it doesn't say hayayim, and the seifa it says hayayim. So the cases are somebody sells to someone what he's going to inherit, or what he's going to trap in his nets or in his fisheries. So if he just says, I'm selling you what I'm going to inherit or what I'm going to trap, that's meaningless because it doesn't own it. However, if he says what I'm going to inherit from my father today, or what I'm going to catch in my nets today, that is a valid sale. Now the Gemara is going to explain why that should be in a few lines, but here the Gemara asks from the first case where you see that you can't sell something you don't own. So how could he be makneh in this field that he does not own? So Rambam Chama said this is a big kasha. It's a big person asking the kasha. It's a big akasha. Rava says it's a big person, but it's not such a big akasha. It's not a problem. Here there's a smichas hadas. There's no problem of davar shalabal elam as long as there's enough reason for the person to rely that the kinyan is actually happening. And here there's a reason that the kinyan is happening. He wants to go be makneh in the field because he doesn't want to be called a thief, and therefore he's motivated to go make sure that it happens. And therefore Shimon has a smichas das that it's going to happen. In the case of selling something that you're going to inherit to something that you're going to catch, there's no major motivation to make it happen, and therefore the receiver is not seimech das on it. Now the Gemara says that this incident, this type of question was sent to Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda, and he said, this is not a good question. You don't even have to look inside to think about it. Rava said it needs a lot of Ian, and the answer is this. Like we said, here you have Smichas Das, but in the case of the trapping and the inheritance, you don't have Smichas Das. Similar thing, a case happened in Pompediza, and they asked the same kasha, and Rabbi Yosef said, this is not a good kasha, you don't even have to think about it. Abai said, no, it's a very good kasha, you do have to think about it, and again, the answer is that here you have Smichas Das, and here you don't have Smichas Das. Now, going back to the Brisa, what's the difference between the Reish and the Sefer? Why in the first case where he didn't say today, it's not kaina because he doesn't own it, but in the case where he says today, it is kaina. What does it make a difference if he says today? He still doesn't own it at that time. So Rabbi Yechanan answers because the fact that he says today shows that he's very motivated to sell, and therefore you have a smichas hadas. Why is that? Because if he says that which I'm going to inherit from my father today, that means the father's alive, but he's about to die, and he really is going to die, and he needs money to conduct the final honors for his fathers, the burial, the kvura, the tachrichin, all these things, and therefore he's very motivated to actually make the sale happen. In the case where he's hunting, if he wants to sell such a small amount that he's willing to sell what he'll trap in one day, how much could he catch already? Obviously, he is very motivated to sell because he needs simply small change to be able to survive. Now, says Rav Huna Rav, another case of selling something that you don't own yet, somebody who says to his friend, I'm being makta to you right now, a field which I'm going to buy tomorrow. I'm going to go buy tomorrow, but the kinyan is now. So the halacha that he says is that it is kaina, it works, even though he doesn't own it yet. Says Rava, it would have been logical that Rav would have said as halacha in a case where he says, a field, I'm going to buy a field for you, because it's easy to buy a field. It's not a challenge, and therefore you do have smichas das. However, if he said, I'm going to buy this field, that's a lot more difficult. What if by the time he goes to buy the field tomorrow, it's not for sale? What if it was already bought? What if the price went up? It's much harder to be able to buy a specific field, and therefore I would think that there's no smichas das on it. However, says the Gemara, it's not true. Rav said it's halacha even in the case of this field, because Rav holds that a person can actually sell something which does not belong to him yet, which the Gemara calls something which is not in the world yet. And the Gemara says the reason that he holds away because he holds like Rabbi Meir. It's a machlekes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Gemara quotes a brisa that brings a number of cases of somebody trying to marry someone which is usher to him to marry now, but will become potentially mutter later. So if somebody is a guy and he gives kesef kedushin to a Bas Yisrael and he says, I'm planning to be Megayer tomorrow, here's kesef kedushin should be chal now for when I become eligible, when I am Megayer tomorrow. Or the opposite, she's the guy and he is Yisrael and he gives her kesef kedushin for after she converts, or if she's an Eved, or if he's an Eved, and the same thing when they become freed, or if she's an Ishes Ish and he says, here's kesef kedushin for after your husband dies. Or if she's a Yivam Lashuk, she's obligated to her Yibam, but she needs to get Chalitza, and here's Kesef Kedushin for after you become free from your Yavam through Chalitza. Or if it's his wife's sister, and the halach is one is also to marry his wife's sister as long as his wife is still alive, can marry two sisters, but once she dies, then the sister becomes mutter. He gives Kesef Kedushin to the sister, and he says, here's Kedushin for after my wife dies, for after your sister dies. So in all these situations, Rav Meir says that the Kiddushin is chal, even though at the time that it's aser. And that's the same thing as this field, which doesn't belong to him yet. And therefore, Rav is saying like Rabbi Meir, and it's chal, even though there's no real smichas das. Gemara now begins in sugya that of returning a shtar hakna, the shtar which we find in the streets. So it says Shmuel, somebody who finds a shtar hakna, that's a loan document. However, the borrower was mishabed his property to pay the loan automatically from the moment that the shtar is written, even if he doesn't ever actually borrow the land. He's makna right away his property to the lender. So somebody finds it in the street, says Shmuel, the halacha is you could return it to the malveh, that he could use it to collect. Because the only two possibilities that you would not collect is if the loan never happened or the loan was already paid off. Now, if the loan never happened, doesn't make a difference because he was already mishabed himself, even if the loan doesn't happen. That it was paid, we're not chayshish, because when somebody pays a loan, he gets back the shtar, and the first thing he does is rip it up to make sure that it doesn't get lost and somehow get returned to the malva and that he gets collected from again. The fact that the shtar is still around is proof, therefore, that it was not paid at all. Said Rav Nachman, my father was one of the scribes, the Seifrim of Mar Shmuel, and I remember when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I heard that they made an announcement, anybody who finds a shtar aknaisa, that it has this shibun in it, it's found in the street, you can return it to the original owner. Says Rav Amram, we also learned this in Brisa, any Maisa Bezdin, you're allowed to return. Maisa Bezdin, the Gemara assumes, means a shtar which is validated by the court. So you see that there's no concern that it was actually paid off. Doesn't matter, no. The Mishnah there is talking about a different case. It's not talking about a regular shtar halva that was certified, it says not forged. It's talking about a shtar of repossession where the Beis gave the malva rights to go take the person's property away because he's not paying the loan. And there are two types of such documents. One is called a chaltasa, where he has property, and this gives him the right to go get it evaluated and take it away. And it's an adrichasa, where he doesn't have property, and he gives him the right to chase after him in any future acquisitions that he gets to take that. Now, those you can't pay off afterwards. Those are never paid off. If those stars are still around, then they haven't been collected yet. Now, Rav asked the kasha, why do you say that these shtaros cannot be repaid, even though you've already issued a shtar that you can collect it, that the malva is allowed to go to the leva and take away his land and repossess it and take legal action against him? The leva could still repay it. As a matter of fact, Rava quotes that the Nahardai says that up to 12 months after land has already been repossessed, the leva can take money and go pay back the person that lent it to him and get his land back. So it's still redeemable. So even though all these things have happened and these stars have been issued, it's still possible to repay the loan, and therefore it is possible that these stars have also been repaid. Amemra also asks, he says, I'm from Naharda. Rav was quoting Naharda. I'm from Naharda, and I say that you can get your land back forever. At any point at which you get the money, you can go back to the seller, you can go back to the lender, and you can give him the money and take back your land from him. So Rava says there's a different reason that you can't collect with these, that there's a different reason you don't have to be afraid that these documents have been repaid, and that by the borrower not tearing them up. If he didn't tear them up, he's literally losing the money himself. He's destroying his own money, and if he didn't do it, it's his own fault. Now, why is that? Because at the time that he repays, he should have demanded the shtar. He should have said, give me this shtar, because I don't want you to collect from me again, and therefore I'm going to tear it up on the spot. Now, let's say the malva says, I don't have the shtar jachasa on me. I don't have the repossession license on me. So then he should say to him, so you know what? Write me shtar that you're selling me the land. Because the truth is, that is what he's doing. Maker adin, the malva doesn't have to give him the land back. Maker adin, and now belongs to the malva, he could say get lost. However, the Rabbanan said, Vasisa hayashav, you should do the right thing. You should allow him to get back his land if he brings you the money. But what's really happening is that the malva is actually selling it back to the leva. So write me a shtar that I sold it back. That way I don't need to get the actual shtar jachasa back, just write me a shtar that I sold it. Now, this is why this couldn't work if it was a regular loan document. A loan document, it is possible that it was repaid, but it wasn't torn up. Because maybe the malva said, I don't have it on me. Or maybe he said, I'm waiting till you pay me the cost of the cipher. The way the salary of the scribe who writes the shtar works is that the malva pays him to create the shtar, and then the leva has to refund it. So if the leva hasn't refunded yet, the malva can say, I'm holding on to the shtar until you pay me for it. Until you pay me the cost of this cipher. Now, if one of those two situations happened, in a shtar halva, there's no recourse. What's he going to say? Write me a shtar that you sold me the land? That doesn't make sense. He didn't sell him the land. So therefore, in a situation like that, it's possible that the malva will have received the money, but he didn't give the shtar back for one of those two excuses. Therefore, we do have to be concerned that it was already repaid and the shtar still exists. Okay, now Gemara now quotes Rabbi Yochanan, who disagrees with this whole halacha of Shmuel. He says somebody finds a shtar in the street, a regular loan document, even though it has been certified by the Beis Din, is not forged and is a valid loan, he can't return it. Not only if it was not fortified, if it was not certified, you can't return it because it could be that the loan was never made, the shtar was just written and never actually used. But even if it was certified, you know the loan was made, that's not a concern, you can't return it because we are choshesh for parayin. And every loan document of Yochanan is concerned that maybe it was repaid. So now Rabbi Yirmiyah asks to Rabbi Yevo, we have a halacha that any Maisa Beis Din you can return, and you can allow them to repay. So how are you telling me that I can't return it? So says Rabbi Yirmiyah, not every action of a court is the same. That's only referring to a situation where you've already established that the leva is a liar, and if we're not going to believe him even if he says it's repaid, as if we don't have to be concerned that it is repaid. Says Rava, just because he lied one time and he claimed that he repaid when he did not means he's never going to pay again. It's still possible that he paid. How could you return it to the malva? So therefore, Rava says, no, that Mishnah is talking about a shtar chatasa and a shtar chasa. It's not talking about a loan document. It's talking about a repossession document. And like Rabbi Zera said before, that is the situation in which you can return it because there's no concern, but a regular loan document, you can't.